Alright, this is going to be a rundown of the AMA that took place today after the stream with Carbine Combat Team, specifically with Stephen Engel and Evan Graziano. So let's get into it. Kind of one of the big points of contention have been the new stat changes that they are proposing. This is getting rid of Brutality, Finesse, Moxie, Tech, and Grit, and instead replacing those primary stats with Assault, Support Power, Health, and Armor. And then they're going to also add in several new secondary stats. Now, they kind of were able to go into more detail this time around and talk about what those specific stats were. They'd already announced several before, but they put a few more in this time. So I'll go ahead and just start with the list. They have multi-hit, which is a chance to deal an additional damage or heal hit at a percentage of the ability damage dealt or the healing given. So it's basically what it sounds like. It's another hit of damage or health that is a smaller fraction of the original. Glance is a tank stat. It's a chance to reduce the hit by X% of damage. So it sounds like on top of what armor already blocks, Glance is going to be an additional damage reduction as well. Also, just before I get too far deep into these, they didn't mention any specific scaling whatsoever, just a general idea of what these stats were. With that said, I'm going to keep going. They mentioned critical mitigation, which reduces the amount of bonus damage from incoming critical hits. This is coupled with a change to the combat formula and deflect critical hit rating. This will be talked about later on in a different article series, but for right now, it's basically, I think they don't want tanks to be uncrittable, but they want a way to combat. It's kind of weird, but so far that's all they've kind of talked about. Reflect is returning a percentage of the damage received to the target that dealt it. So like in Diablo 3, it'd be kind of like Thorns, except it's a percentage damage instead of a flat amount of damage. Be kind of interesting to see how that one scales. Intensity is then another stat, increases outgoing healing, but also increases the focus cost of the ability. This is kind of interesting because I wonder if it's going to be a percentage focus cost increase. I know medics have a heal that doesn't cost any focus, so it'll be kind of interesting to see how that plays into their builds. And then last, and this is probably the most heated discussed stat, is Vigor, which increases outgoing damage that's scaled based on your current health percentage. Now, they haven't talked about if this is a specific range of health or if it's like, even just 1%. So there's nothing going on there, but a lot of people got kind of heated on it. I'm honestly interested to see how they kind of do this. I really like the idea of a lot of these stats, so basically it just comes down to their scaling. And then here's kind of a reasoning that they gave for some of these. This is just a quick summary. Stats were not intuitive enough for new players. They basically didn't understand the names and where they kind of went, and also the fact that with different classes you had different stats affect them in different ways. So you had, Brutality was good on warriors but not on engineers, and it did something different on engineers, whereas Finesse was the equivalent to Brutality. So that was kind of a confusing mess as it was, and they kind of wanted to get away from that system. Another reason is because players were uniformly ruining the same stats with no real diversity, at least after a certain point. Initially you were wanting to rune a ton of assault power for most classes for damage, and then after you hit a certain assault power threshold, you would just rune crit. So they're kind of wanting to get away from that mold of everyone's ruining the exact same thing. But they said that there's going to be more info coming out on this kind of topic with article series that they're calling a deep dive. So you kind of have to keep a lookout for that. And with those, there should be future AMAs. Nothing 100% for sure, but as far as I know, that's the plan, is that there are going to be more AMAs as more announcements are made. Alright, so besides the stat changes, they also talked about doing item changes. Now, all items will fall in line with the new changes. They will automatically be updated, and any runes that are in the gear will be mailed to the player as a token to exchange for the new stat change equivalent. I'm assuming that this is along the lines of a Fire Assassin rune of Brutality would be exchanged for maybe just an Assassin rune token for whatever you need. Maybe a vendor would be put in. Not 100% sure. They kind of touched on it a little bit, but not too much. So, but in regards to items, specifically with future raid tier releases, the power creep will not be as strong as it was from Genetic Archives to Datascape. They'll be leaving like the current scaling as it is because they like the way it basically nerfs the content without actually going in and coding any way to actually nerf it for newer players. But further down the line, it won't be as severe. And then speaking of the new raid tier, there will not be one with the latest drop, and I believe they are wanting to get away from the term drop. At least that's what I call from hearing from Carbine employees. But the new raid is being worked on, just taking a backseat to all the the all hands on deck status that is the free-to-play launch. I believe their reasoning is so they are able to focus 100% on this launch, then be able to focus 100% on the raid and the testing we'll need, because I don't think players want another Datascape on launch scenario. A lot of you might not be familiar with that, but it was pretty nasty, especially for 40 man. Also, by holding back the next raid, besides the quality purposes for testing and all that, they won't be polarizing new players from old players once the new players come in. It could be pretty overwhelming to have a new player come in and there's 3 new raid tiers and they feel like they're super far behind. So the downside of this is it means that there's going to be some bleeding of current players, but it's probably better financially in the long run. You just have to keep the ship afloat somehow. I'd like to make a quick apology for the start of the AMA today. During stream, Carbine Sunshine had announced that there was already a pinned topic up for where the AMA would take place, which led to people asking questions in the wrong thread, and that was actually a reminder that we had pinned up a day or two before. So because of that, I created a new topic that I assumed would hold a spot for the AMA, but it wasn't until after the stream that they created their own thread and then contacted the mod team about this. So I tried messaging every person who had posted a question to let them know where to post, and I apologize if your question wasn't posted within the thread, if you had to go away or something like that. But since then, the mod team has talked with Omid and Carbine Sunshine about future AMAs and letting us know the format they want to handle them and the terminology to be used, when talking about them during the stream. So that shouldn't be a problem from here on out. Hopefully this gives you kind of an insight onto some of the changes that they have coming up, and there will be more AMAs in the future. Sit tight until more information comes out, but I hope this was helpful and informative. Take care.